Welcome to Go Readling Bedtime Stories, presented by GoReadling.com. Personalized education and reading skills for kids. Find a comfortable spot, close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and let our story carry you gently off to sleep. Tonight's story is called The Bremen Town Musicians. Once upon a time, in a land of rolling green hills and sleepy old farmhouses, there lived a dear old donkey who had spent his whole life working very, very hard. Every single day, from the first hint of soft morning light until the moon peeked shyly in the evening sky, he carried heavy sacks of grain to the mill and pulled carts filled with fresh vegetables to the market. His coat, once a shiny, vibrant gray, was now a little dull, and his strong legs, though still sturdy, moved with a slower, more thoughtful rhythm. He had seen countless sunrises paint the sky with warm colors and felt the gentle touch of rain on his long ears for many, many years. He loved the familiar smell of hay in the barn and the quiet hum of the farm, but lately, a little worry had begun to tickle in his heart, like a tiny stone tumbling about. He knew he wasn't as quick as he used to be, and a sad feeling told him his farmer might soon think he was no longer very useful, and that made his long ears droop with a quiet sigh. He longed for something new, a fresh adventure, a different kind of song to hum. One crisp morning, as the sun began to spread its warm golden butter across the fields, the old donkey stood by the barn door, listening to the sleepy chirping of the sparrows. He thought about all the wonderful sounds in the world, the rustling leaves, the bubbling brook, even the distant chime of the village bell. He closed his eyes and imagined a place where music filled the air, where every day was a performance, and where an old donkey like him could still find a special purpose. He pictured himself playing a lute, or perhaps a big drum, making happy sounds that would make people smile. A brave little spark of an idea began to flicker inside him, growing brighter with each passing moment, chasing away the worry. "I know what I'll do," he decided, his voice a soft rumbling whisper. "I'll run away. I'll go to Bremen Town. There I'll become a town musician, filling the streets with joyful noise, and no one will ever think I'm too old or too tired to be loved." With a newfound spring in his step and a hopeful tune already humming in his heart, he turned his back on the familiar farm and trotted slowly down the winding road, his spirit feeling lighter than it had in years. The road stretched out before the donkey like a long, inviting ribbon, winding through fields of green grass and past tall, whispering trees. The air was fresh and sweet, carrying the scent of wildflowers and damp earth after the morning dew. With every gentle hoofbeat, he felt a surge of excitement, a feeling he hadn't known in many, many years. He imagined the grand city of Bremen, with its bustling squares and friendly faces, and the happy sounds of music floating from every window. He pictured himself standing proudly, perhaps wearing a little bow tie, playing a delightful melody on an imaginary instrument, his long ears twitching with the rhythm. "Oh, what a wonderful life that will be," he thought, a soft bray escaping his lips, not of sadness, but of pure, bubbling joy. The sun climbed higher in the sky, warming his sturdy back, and a little butterfly with bright orange wings fluttered past his nose, as if wishing him well on his grand adventure. He truly believed that a new beginning was waiting for him, just beyond the horizon, a place where his old age would be a badge of wisdom, not a burden. As the afternoon sun began its slow journey towards the western sky, painting soft, long shadows across the path, the donkey continued his gentle trot. The road became a little dustier, and the trees grew thicker, their branches reaching out like friendly arms. He hummed a tuneless song to himself, a mix of hopeful brays and soft snorts, imagining the kind of music he would play in Bremen. Would it be a lively jig, perfect for dancing, or a sweet lullaby, gentle enough for dreams? Suddenly, he heard a sound, a quiet, sniffly sort of noise, coming from under a big, shady oak tree just a little way ahead. It wasn't the happy chirping of birds or the rustling of leaves. It was a sound that tugged at his heart, a sound of sadness. He slowed his pace, his long ears swiveling forward, curious and a little concerned. He could just make out a shape huddled beneath the sprawling branches, a shape that seemed to be shaking ever so slightly. His kind old heart, always ready to share a comforting thought, felt a gentle pull, wondering what sorrowful creature might be hiding there. Peeking around the thick trunk of the ancient oak tree, the donkey saw a sight that made his own hopeful smile fade just a little. There sat a dog, an old, weary hunting dog with a coat that was once a rich, shiny brown, now a bit matted and dusty. His eyes, though still bright with a hint of past adventures, were filled with a quiet sadness, and he was sighing the most woeful sighs you could ever imagine. A big, floppy ear was pressed against the cool earth, and his tail lay limp, not wagging with the usual doggy joy. "Oh, dear me," thought the donkey, his heart aching with sympathy. "This poor creature looks as if he's lost his favorite bone, or perhaps his very best friend." The dog looked up slowly, his brown eyes meeting the donkey's kind gaze, and he let out another long, mournful sigh, a sound that seemed to carry all the sadness of the world within it. The donkey knew, without a single word being spoken, that this dog felt just as he had, unwanted and a little bit lost in the wide, wide world. The kind donkey gently approached the sad dog, his hoofbeats soft upon the dusty ground. "Why are you sighing so deeply, my friend?" he asked, his voice a warm, gentle rumble. The dog looked up again, his tail giving a tiny, hesitant thump against the grass, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Oh, dear donkey," the dog replied, his voice a soft, tired woof. "I am old now, and my hunting days are long behind me. My master said I was no longer quick enough, and he looked at me with such a sad expression, as if I were a worn-out old rug. I ran away, for I knew my useful life was over, and I didn't want to bring anyone sorrow." The donkey nodded, understanding every single word. "Well, my dear fellow," he said with a cheerful bray, "I'm off to Bremen Town to become a musician. It's a grand place where we can make beautiful music and find new friends. Won't you come with me? We can make wonderful tunes together. Perhaps you could sing a lovely harmony." The dog's tail gave a slightly bigger wag, a tiny spark of hope beginning to glow in his weary heart. With a fresh burst of energy, the old dog scrambled to his feet, a grateful wag returning to his tail, and together he and the donkey set off down the winding road. The donkey felt a warmth spread through his chest, knowing he wasn't alone anymore, and the dog felt a lightness in his paws he hadn't felt in ages. They walked side by side, their steps a quiet rhythm on the path. The sun dipped lower, casting long, peaceful shadows, and the air grew cooler, smelling of pine trees and damp earth. They talked about what kind of music they might play in Bremen, the donkey imagining a booming drum, and the dog thinking he might be rather good at a deep, melodic bark, like a tuba. They shared happy dreams of bright lights and smiling faces, of making joyful sounds that would fill the streets and warm the hearts of everyone who listened. The world seemed a little brighter, a little less lonely, with two friends walking shoulder to shoulder, heading towards a hopeful new adventure, leaving their worries far behind them. As twilight began to softly drape its silvery cloak over the sleepy world, the two friends continued their journey, their hearts filled with shared anticipation. The stars began to twinkle like tiny diamonds scattered across a velvet cloth, and the gentle hoot of an owl echoed softly from the woods. Suddenly, they heard another sound, a most mournful sound indeed, coming from beside the path. It was a sad, drawn-out meow that sounded like a little cloud filled with tears. The dog pricked up his ears, his keen sense of hearing picking up the gentle rustle of leaves nearby, and he nudged the donkey with his nose. "Listen, my friend," he woofed softly. "I think someone else is feeling just as lost as we were." The donkey, ever kind and curious, slowed his pace, his long ears swiveling towards the sound. He could just make out a small, dark shape huddled under a bramble bush, its fur looking a little ruffled and its little tail drooping. Another sad meow drifted through the quiet evening air, and the donkey knew they had found another friend in need, another gentle soul seeking a new path. Approaching the bramble bush with soft, careful steps, the donkey and dog discovered a cat, a beautiful creature with fur as dark as midnight and eyes that shimmered with a hint of green, even in the dimming light. But her elegant whiskers drooped, and her little paws were tucked sadly beneath her, as if she were trying to disappear from the world. She looked up at them with a forlorn meow, her gaze holding a deep, quiet sadness that made their hearts ache. "Oh, little one, why are you so sad?" asked the donkey, his voice a comforting rumble. The cat let out another tiny, sorrowful mew, and then explained, her voice a soft, gentle purr mixed with sniffles. "I am old now, and my teeth are not as sharp as they once were for catching little mice. My mistress, who loved me so dearly for many years, began to look at me with worried eyes, and I knew my time at the warm hearth was coming to an end. So I crept away, hoping to find a quiet corner somewhere to spend my last days." The dog then stepped forward, his tail giving a happy little wag. "Come with us," he barked gently. "We're going to Bremen Town to be musicians. We need a graceful cat like you to sing a beautiful high note." The cat's eyes, which had been so full of sadness, now sparkled with a tiny, hopeful glimmer. She stretched out her sleek body, gave a little shake to her dark fur, and with a surprisingly spry leap, joined her new friends on the road. The three of them continued their journey under the watchful gaze of the rising moon, their footsteps now a soft chorus on the quiet path. The donkey led the way, his sturdy legs setting a steady rhythm, while the dog trotted happily beside him, occasionally nudging the cat with his nose in a friendly way. The cat, feeling a warmth she hadn't known in days, purred a gentle tune, imagining herself perched gracefully on a stage, her voice weaving a delicate melody. They talked about the wonderful sounds they would create together, a symphony of brays, barks, and meows that would surely charm everyone in Bremen. The night air was cool and smelled of damp leaves, but the warmth of their new friendship made them feel cozy and safe. Each of them, once lonely and a little afraid, now had a purpose and companions, making the wide world seem a much less daunting place. The night deepened, and the sleepy world was bathed in a soft, silvery moonlight. The three friends, now feeling quite content in each other's company, walked on, their thoughts filled with the exciting prospect of Bremen Town and their future as famous musicians. As they rounded a gentle bend in the road, the dog suddenly stopped, his ears twitching. "Listen," he whispered, his voice a low growl of surprise. From a nearby farmyard, a sound drifted through the quiet night air, a sound that was usually heard at the very start of the morning, not in the deep stillness of night. It was a loud, frantic cock-a-doodle-doo, but it sounded so distressed, so full of alarm and fear, that it made the very feathers on the dog's back stand up a little. It was not a cheerful morning call, but a cry of pure, bubbling worry. The donkey, whose long ears were just as good at hearing distant sounds, nodded gravely. "That's a very troubled rooster indeed," he rumbled. "We must go and see what is wrong, for no happy rooster crows with such a fearful sound in the middle of the night." Following the sound, the trio quietly approached a small farm gate. Perched on top of the gatepost, a magnificent rooster with bright, fiery red feathers and a proud, colorful tail was flapping his wings frantically and crowing with all his might, his voice trembling with distress. His eyes, usually so bold and bright, were wide with fear, scanning the dark shadows around him. "Oh, good Sir Rooster, why do you make such a frightful noise at this late hour?" asked the donkey, his voice gentle and reassuring. The rooster, still shaking a little, stopped his crowing long enough to explain, his voice a series of hurried squawks. "My mistress is having guests tomorrow, and she told the cook that I would make a delicious supper. I heard them talking about me, and oh dear, I knew what that meant.
I've been crowing all day and night in protest, hoping to make them change their minds, but it's no use. I simply must fly away and escape my fate." The cat, with a knowing flick of her tail, chimed in. "Then come with us. We are going to Bremen to become musicians. Your loud, clear crow would be the most magnificent addition to our band, like a trumpet signaling the start of a wonderful song."
The brave rooster, seeing the kind faces of the donkey, dog, and cat, felt a sudden surge of hope lift his feathered spirit. He gave one last, rather defiant cock-a-doodle-doo, aimed at the sleepy farmhouse, then fluttered down from the gatepost and proudly joined his new friends. Now there were 4 of them, walking together beneath the silent stars. A rather unusual band of travelers, but each with a heart full of courage and a shared dream of a new life. The donkey, dog, cat, and rooster walked with a lighter step, their fears melting away with each companion added to their happy group. They talked excitedly about Bremen, imagining a bustling town square where they would stand, making the marvelous music. The donkey would bray a deep bass, the dog would bark a cheerful rhythm, the cat would meow a sweet melody, and the rooster would crow a glorious fanfare, announcing their presence to the world. The sounds of crickets chirping and leaves rustling seemed to join their hopeful chorus, as if nature itself was cheering them on. As the deepest part of the night began to settle, a soft, sleepy quiet fell over the land. The moon climbed high, painting the world in shades of silver and gray, and the air grew quite chilly. The 4 friends, who had been so busy walking and dreaming, suddenly realized something very important. They were all rather hungry. Their tummies rumbled a little, and their paws and hooves felt a bit tired from their long journey. They looked around, hoping to spot a cozy place to rest, perhaps a warm barn or a sheltered spot under a large tree. That's when the dog, with his excellent eyesight, spotted something wonderful in the distance. "Look," he barked softly, pointing a paw towards a tiny flicker of light, like a playful firefly, shining through the dark woods. "A light! Perhaps it's a house, and maybe, just maybe, there'll be a warm fire and a little something to eat." A spark of new hope ignited in their tired hearts, and with renewed energy, they changed direction, heading towards that comforting glimmer in the vast, dark forest, their stomachs rumbling with eager anticipation. Carefully, quietly, the 4 friends made their way through the rustling trees, following the beckoning light. The air grew warmer, and a most delicious smell began to drift towards them, the scent of roasted meat and freshly baked bread, making their hungry tummies grumble even louder. They crept closer, their steps soft and stealthy, until they reached a clearing. There, nestled amongst the trees, was a cozy little cottage, its windows glowing with a warm, inviting light. But as they peeked through the window, their eyes grew wide with surprise. Inside, gathered around a big, sturdy table laden with a grand feast, sat a band of rough-looking robbers, their faces shadowed by their hats, laughing loudly and enjoying the abundant food. They looked rather jolly, but also a little bit scary, with their big boots and their rough voices. The animals knew they couldn't just knock on the door and ask to join. These weren't the sort of folk who would welcome unexpected guests, especially not a donkey, a dog, a cat, and a rooster. The 4 friends whispered together, their heads close, making a very important plan. The donkey, ever the thoughtful one, said, "We must scare them away, but how?" The dog, with his sharp instincts, suggested, "We need to make a noise so loud and so strange that they'll think a monster has come." The cat, with her clever, sparkling eyes, purred, "And we need to make ourselves look very, very big and frightening." The rooster, with his proud chest puffed out, agreed. "A grand, terrifying spectacle. That's what we need." After a moment of careful thought, a brilliant idea sparked among them. They decided they would stack themselves one on top of the other, forming a towering, wobbly, but very impressive creature.
The donkey, being the tallest and strongest, would stand at the bottom, then the dog would climb onto his back, followed by the nimble cat, and finally the brave rooster would perch right on top, ready to let out the loudest crow of his life. Their hearts beat with a mixture of fear and excitement, knowing this was their chance for a warm meal and a safe place to rest. With careful movements and soft whispers, the animals began to carry out their clever plan. The old donkey stood firm and steady against the cottage wall, his strong legs planted like ancient tree trunks. Then, with a little grunt and a determined spring, the dog carefully climbed onto the donkey's broad back, finding a comfortable perch. The donkey shifted just a tiny bit, making sure his canine friend was secure. Next, the agile cat, with paws as light as falling leaves, leaped gracefully onto the dog's back, her claws retracting gently so as not to hurt him. She balanced herself with elegant poise, her tail swishing softly in the chilly air. Finally, the proud rooster, after a few practice flutters, soared upwards and landed perfectly on the cat's head, his fiery red comb pointing towards the bright moon. There they stood, a wobbly, fantastic tower of animals, reaching high towards the cottage window, their shadows stretching long and strange behind them. Each friend held their breath, their hearts thumping like tiny drums, ready for the big moment, their eyes fixed on the inviting light inside the robber's cozy cottage and the delicious smells wafting from within. "Ready, everyone?" whispered the donkey, his voice a low, rumbling earthquake. "Ready!" barked the dog, his tail giving a tiny, excited wag. "Ready!" meowed the cat, her whiskers twitching with anticipation. "Ready!" crowed the rooster, his chest puffed out with bravery. And then, at the donkey's signal, they unleashed their carefully planned symphony of chaos. The donkey let out the loudest, most ear-splitting bray he ever made, a sound that vibrated through the very ground. On his back, the dog added his own contribution, a series of fierce, booming barks that echoed like thunder. The cat, with a mighty leap through the window, let out a piercing meow that sounded like 1,000 angry spirits. And finally, the brave rooster, perched high above, crowed a triumphant cock-a-doodle-doo with all his might, a sound so sudden and shrill it could wake the sleeping moon. Together, their combined noise was an incredible, monstrous cacophony, a jumble of sounds that slammed into the cozy cottage like a crashing wave, startling the unsuspecting robbers in the most terrifying way imaginable.
The robbers, who had been laughing and feasting just moments before, froze with fright. Their cheerful chatter died in their throats, and their eyes, which had been full of merriment, now widened with pure terror. They saw the giant, shadowy creature looming at the window, a jumbled beast with glowing eyes and a gaping mouth, and heard the most unearthly, horrifying sounds they had ever imagined. "A monster!" one robber shrieked, knocking over his chair. "It's a terrifying, multi-headed beast!" cried another, dropping his roast chicken. "A ghost! A witch! A goblin from the deepest woods!" yelled a third, scrambling under the table. They didn't stop to think, didn't pause to grab their hats or their treasure. With desperate cries and panicked shouts, they sprang from their seats, tripping over each other in their haste. The very thought of such a monstrous apparition filling their cozy cottage sent shivers down their spines and made their knees knock together. They burst out the door and fled into the dark, silent woods as fast as their legs could carry them, scattering like startled squirrels, leaving their delicious feast, their warm fire, and their comfortable cottage completely abandoned to the unexpected, noisy invaders. As the last sounds of the fleeing robbers faded into the distant woods, the four friends carefully untangled themselves from their wobbly tower. They looked at each other, their eyes sparkling with triumph and a little bit of disbelief. "We did it!" barked the dog excitedly, his tail wagging so hard his whole body wiggled. "Indeed we did," purred the cat, arching her back gracefully. The donkey gave a pleased snort, and the rooster let out a proud, but much softer, cock-a-doodle-doo. And then their hungry tummies reminded them of the wonderful feast spread out on the table. Oh, what a sight it was! Roasted meats, crusty bread, sweet berries, and creamy milk. They wasted no time, each finding their favorite spot. The donkey munched happily on crisp green vegetables and tender bread. The dog gobbled up the meaty scraps with great delight. The cat delicately sipped the warm milk from a bowl and enjoyed a juicy piece of fish, purring with every bite. And the rooster, perched on the back of a chair, pecked at the grains and crumbs with great satisfaction. Their long journey and clever plan had certainly paid off, with the most magnificent dinner they could have ever dreamed of. After their wonderful meal, the four friends felt full and content, their worries melting away like snowflakes in the sun. It was such a cozy cottage, much warmer and more comfortable than any barn or hollow tree they had ever known. They decided this would be their new home, a much better place than faraway Bremen, where they might have to work hard for their supper. The donkey found a soft pile of hay in the stable behind the cottage and settled down with a contented sigh, his long legs stretching out. The dog curled up on a warm rug right by the crackling fireplace, feeling the gentle heat soak into his old bones, dreaming happy doggy dreams. The cat, ever the lover of comfort, found a soft armchair and snuggled deep into its cushions, her purr a gentle, rhythmic hum. And the rooster, with his keen eyes, flew up to a sturdy wooden beam in the kitchen, finding the perfect high perch to watch over his new friends. The cottage, once filled with the noisy robbers, was now filled with the peaceful sounds of sleeping animals, each dreaming of their happy, shared future in this unexpected, wonderful home. Meanwhile, deep in the dark, silent woods, the band of robbers huddled together, trembling with fear. After some time, when the initial terror had begun to settle just a little, the leader, who was a rather bold fellow, though still quite scared, decided he needed to investigate. "Someone must go back and see what kind of monster has taken our house," he whispered, his voice still a little shaky. But none of the other robbers wanted to go. So, with a deep breath and a pounding heart, the leader, being the bravest, or perhaps just the most curious, crept back towards the cottage, moving very, very slowly through the rustling leaves. The moon had gone behind a cloud, making the path even darker, and a chilly wind rustled through the branches. He tiptoed to the window, peering cautiously inside. All was quiet, bathed in shadows. He saw no monstrous creature, only the faint glow of dying embers in the fireplace. Perhaps it left, he thought, a tiny sliver of courage returning to his heart, and he pushed open the front door ever so gently, stepping into the silent, dark cottage, ready to reclaim his home. As the robber leader slipped quietly into the darkened cottage, his eyes were still adjusting to the deep shadows. He cautiously made his way towards the fireplace, hoping to rekindle the fire and light a lamp. But suddenly, from the armchair where the cat was sleeping, her green eyes, usually so soft, sprang open like two glowing embers, startling him terribly in the gloom. "A witch with fiery eyes," he screamed silently to himself, stumbling backward. As he turned to flee, his foot landed on the sleeping dog's paw, waking the old hound with a start. The dog, startled and confused in the dark, bit the robber sharply on the leg, thinking it was an intruder. "A man with a knife," shrieked the robber in his mind, hopping on one foot, convinced he was being attacked. He tripped over something large and furry in the stable doorway. It was the donkey, who, disturbed by the commotion, let out a mighty kick with his strong leg, sending the robber sprawling out into the yard. "A giant with a club," he yelled inwardly, his heart pounding like a drum. And just as he scrambled to his feet, the rooster, woken by all the noise, let out a piercing cock-a-doodle-doo from his perch on the beam, a sound that seemed to slice through the night like a judge's final pronouncement. The terrified robber, his heart hammering like a blacksmith's hammer, didn't stop to look back. He ran faster than he had ever run in his life, bursting through the dark woods until he reached his trembling gang. "Don't go back," he gasped, panting for breath, his eyes wide with fear. "The house is haunted by terrible creatures.
A witch with glowing eyes sat in the armchair. A man with a knife bit my leg. A giant with a club kicked me out the door. And a judge with a loud, booming voice shouted from the roof. The other robbers, listening to his wild, panicked tale, turned even paler than before. They were absolutely convinced their cozy cottage was now a place of unspeakable horrors, and they vowed never, ever to return to that haunted house again. Back at the cottage, the four animal friends settled back into their comfortable spots, their brief disturbance over. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting a warm, sleepy glow. The air smelled of wood smoke and lingering delicious food, a comforting blend. They each drifted back to sleep, feeling wonderfully safe and sound, nestled in their new, unexpected, and truly perfect home, far away from any worries or long journeys to Bremen.
And so the old donkey, the brave dog, the clever cat, and the proud rooster lived out their days happily in the cozy cottage, forever free from fear and loneliness. They never had to travel all the way to Bremen Town, for they had found something even better: a warm home, delicious food, and the very best of friends, right where they least expected it. Each morning, the rooster still crowed his cheerful greeting, that now it was a happy sound, not a frightened one. The cat still purred her gentle songs, the dog still gave his happy barks, and the donkey still let out his rumbling bray. But these were all sounds of contentment and joy. They ate their meals together, shared their dreams by the fire, and watched the seasons change outside their window, always surrounded by the quiet comfort of their friendship. They learned that sometimes the most wonderful adventures lead you to the most unexpected and perfect places, and that being useful and loved means something different for everyone. Now close your eyes, little one, and drift off to sleep, knowing that even old friends can find new beginnings and happy endings, just like our Bremen Town musicians. Sweet dreams and good night. And that is the end of our story. Thank you for listening to Go Readling Bedtime Stories. Visit goreadling.com for more stories, reading adventures, and fun learning for kids. Sweet dreams, little one. Good night.